Hello and welcome back to Sabres of Infinity. Chapter 3, wherein the cavalry officers make landfall at the port of Noringia and prepares to discharge his martial duty. The entire port town of Noringia is far from impressive. Nestled between two low hills, the cluster of strange, steep-roofed houses is hardly a match for the glittering beacon spires of Aetoria or the orderly mills of Tannisburg. However, that has not stopped the town and the bay it presides over from bustling with activity. As the Victoria sails into Noringia's sheltered harbour, you see a forest of masts, supply vessels, horse transports, line of battleships and lean frigates like the Victoria's, each flying the Griffin and Tower of Tierra, crowd the port, looming over the shattered defences which the local lord had tried to use, in vain, to hold off the royal army. It takes almost 4 hours for the Victoria's to weave its way through the shoals, breakwaters and other ships into its assigned place in the harbour. As you pass other vessels, you hear a scattered back and forth of hails, cheers, and shouted hellos from your ship to the others. One vessel, a third rate of 74 guns, flying the red and white pennon of a rear admiral over the Griffin and Tower, offers no response. Her crew is too busy trying to keep her afloat in spite of the massive, house-sized hole punched into her hull. Montes is on the first boat. As he departs, he orders everyone to assemble with the other squadrons of the regiment in the town square. By the time you say your farewells and are bundled on a boat, it is past midday. Neither Casarosto or Elson are on the boat with you, leaving you with only the faces of a dozen rankers and a handful of very taciturn oarsmen for company. The time seems to pass slowly. Every sloshing sweep of the oars seems to last an eternity. After an hour of torturous monotony, your boat finally pulls up to the primitive wooden pier. You half expect something momentous to happen as you set your foot down on the weather-beaten planks, some kind of fanfare to announce your arrival on this foreign and hostile land. Yet there is nothing. Thousands of men like you, serving the same king, have already landed on this very pier. Thousands more will likely do the same in the days to come. Your arrival is no special occasion. As you walk down the pier and join the other assembled dragoons waiting in the town square, you learn that Captain Montes, like the other squadron commanders, has been called away to a staff meeting with His Grace, the Duke of Cunaris. The assembled regiment has inevitably reduced itself to knots of friends and acquaintances. It seems that no amount of training in the world is going to keep 1,200 young men standing still in the sun unless someone is yelling at them to do so. Yep, reasonable. You wait in the milling crowd of fighting men for a few minutes, catching glimmers of conversations here and there, but nothing substantial. Soon you see the Duke of Cunaris approaching at the head of a party of senior officers. You quickly fall into ranks with the rest of the regiment. The portrait in Fernandez Court does not do the Duke justice. In the full harness of a knight of St. Joshua, he casts an imposing figure, towering at least half a head over most of the men of the regiment. His armor shines in the setting sun, bane runes glowing a fey blue invisible to all but bane-blooded eyes. Dragoons! Welcome to Antar. His voice rolls over you, a rich baritone laden with authority. When His Majesty made the decision to fight the Antari on their home soil, we all knew that we would not be fighting a conventional war. Our enemy is strong in numbers, strong in arms, and strong in bane casting. Thus, we cannot face him in open battle. The Duke pauses for a moment and allows the regiment to grumble. Many had signed up expecting a quick, exciting campaign. Where the enemy is strong, we are weak, but we have our own strengths. If we are to win this war, we must fight intelligently. His Majesty has decided upon a campaign of skirmishes and raids. As a result, the majority of you shall be detached in small units to serve at His Majesty's pleasure. Expect to receive your orders over the next 2 days. Your squadron commanders may require some of you to depart immediately. Speech delivered, the Duke sweeps his gaze back and forth over the assembled regiment, once as if capturing an image in his mind. Then, regiment dismissed. As the assembled regiment disperses, you see Captain Montes making his way through the crowd, handing out orders in thin envelopes to the squadron's 5 lieutenants, each assigned to command a troop of 40. You note a few of the other junior officers from your regiment heading away in groups, all in the same direction. You recognize Cornet Elson leading them. You ask them where they're going, sure. You accost a small gaggle of young men, you ask them where they're going, and Elson steps forward to reply. My dear fellow, did you not hear? The garrison has set up an officers' club on the other side of town. My intelligence tells me that they have a sort of potato wine here. Strong stuff, but cheap as a maiden's song. Care to join us? Okay, sure. The makeshift officers' club is a low, half-timbered building standing atop foundations of grey fieldstone. Bright light pours out from every open window, spilling warm yellow and the sounds of laughter onto the street. A pair of sentries in the orange of the Tierran line infantry stand at attention at each side of the front door, bayonets fixed to the muzzles of their long pattern muskets. They are clearly there to keep out the riffraff. As you approach, the two guards bar the door with their muskets. One leans forward to check the lot of you for proof of your officer's ranks. Although the unusual colours and unique insignia of your regiment gives them a bit of trouble, they do not detain you for longer than a few moments before nodding and letting you pass. You step through the doorway into a great hall blazing with light and warmth. Two great hearths burn merrily as enlisted stewards and hired staff scurry about, platters of food and wine glasses balanced upon each elbow. Scattered around the room are a half-dozen tables crowded with officers, their wives and mistresses, all bantering and partaking in various games. As Elson steps in after you, he waves to a tall, slim man with similarly blonde hair and a thin moustache, who excuses himself from his game of caster's folly and approaches you. Weeks of training override your conscious mind, and you snap to attention as soon as you see the insignia of a superior officer glistening upon the approaching man's shoulders. An instant later, you hear the others behind you do the same. The man idly waves you to be at ease. Awaiting his cue, Elson steps forward. My dear fellows, may I introduce my cousin by marriage, his, not mine, Lord Captain Winthrop Dal Hartigan, eldest son of the 4th Viscount of Hugh, currently with the 5th Regiment of Foot. Captain Hartigan greets each of you with a warm handshake. Moving with the grace lent only by high nobility, he leads you to his previous table, only to find his card game already finished and the players preparing to leave. What's all this? Captain Hartigan demands, his tone eminently civil. Must you all leave so soon? One of the other men, a lieutenant, nods gravely. Afraid so, sir. Wiltshire needs to be on sentry duty in half an hour, and... The lieutenant looks over to the other side of the table, where a petite brunette stands, staring at him with a rather impatient expression. I think my wife wishes to leave. Good night, sir. With that, the two officers vacate the table, leaving you alone with two of your fellow dragoons, Elson and Lord Captain Hartigan. The captain looks around for other occupied tables, which might deign to accommodate all 5 of you. You notice Elson almost unconsciously falling in as well, trying to help his older cousin. It is clear that the younger officer sees the elder as something of an example. After a moment, the captain turns back to you with a defeated expression and shrugs. Well, it would appear that we are free from the obligation of joining another table. Seeing as this one is empty, I would say that sets us at liberty to choose our own diversions for the evening. Captain Hartigan presents you with 3 options. There is, of course, the classic game of Tassenserd, a game more of personalities than luck. It would be a simple thing to set up a game for 5 players. Hartigan has also brought with him a box carved out of dark, fragrant wood. He informs you that it is meant for the playing of Key, a Kian game of some antiquity, favoured by the generals and statesmen of that savant power and famed for the complexity of its play. Both games would naturally require you to stake some of your ready cash. For a gentleman of your rank, such a thing would only be proper. Of course, if you're unwilling to stake money on the outcome of either game, Hartigan seems unopposed to merely talking the entire evening, perhaps giving you a concise background of the war. Oh no, we're definitely playing. How much money do we have? 1260, income 5. I have no point of reference for that. Is that a lot? Is that not a lot? I don't know. Probably good enough. We're playing Key. Hartigan places the box on the table and undoes 2 tiny metal latches along the sides. Opening what is now obviously a container, the captain takes out 3 dozen finely carved pieces, half made of ebony and half of ivory. As he sets up the board, he begins to explain the rules to you. Your attempt at mastering the ancient and inscrutable game of Key proves quite disastrous indeed. Oh god, I forgot we're stupid, we can't read, we can't learn from books. Oops. While you are able to grasp the rudiments of the game after an hour and a half of patient tutoring, you cannot, for the life of you, scrape together the focus needed to win. As the night continues, you lose match after match, falling prey to surprise attacks and ambushes which catch you entirely unawares. I thought we'd get to play. Finally, after you lose your fourth game, Hartigan calls an end to your humiliation. Alson tries to console you as he collects his winnings. Perhaps Key was a bad choice, dear fellow. Worry not, I'm sure you will have many opportunities in future to improve. A few minutes later, as you walk towards your billet? Captain Hartigan has a few words with you. If I may be so blunt, Cornet Castleton, your actions this evening have shown you to be more confidence than sense. Elson has told me that you have other talents, that you are an exemplary fighter. However, seek not to forget that you are not some barbarian swordsman fighting in a duel ring, but an officer of His Majesty's army. Do not risk those whom you command for personal glory, for it is their lives you dice with. That seems a bit out of place to say, but okay. Hartigan stops in the town square where you had assembled with your regiment just a few hours before. The dragoon officers' barracks are over there. If you will excuse me, I must return to my own quarters. The barracks turn out to be a large, stately building of grey stone, built with the curved roofs and elaborate stone scrollwork of the Qian style. Judging by the expensive work on the mahogany doors and the thick red carpets, the building had likely been the winter home of one of the great lords of the Antari Congress. The Terran officers who had come before you have certainly left their mark. Every instance of the Antari double-headed eagle you come across has been defaced, sometimes brutally. One carving in the main hall, too big to be cut down, is instead draped with the griffin and tower banner of the unified kingdom. Despite the thorough job the first Terran residents did of vandalizing the place, the furnishings were left mostly intact. As such, it is quite easy for the corporal at the door to find you a relatively undamaged room for the night. With the assurance that your personal effects are to be transferred from the Victorious in the morning, you proceed to your room. Your temporary quarters seem almost impossibly luxurious, especially after a few weeks in the cramped and constantly rocking cabin on the Victorious. Before you can work up the urge to do anything else, you sink into the too soft mattress of the ornate four-poster bed and fall into a deep, exhausted sleep. You wake in the morning to the sound of an insistent knock on your door. After taking a few moments to make yourself presentable, you open it to find a stocky, well-muscled sergeant wearing a dragoon jacket at least 2 sizes too small for him and an impressive set of sideburns. He introduces himself as Sergeant Solomon Lanzarel, a recent transfer from another unit which had taken too many casualties in the final assault on the town and had been broken up to provide reinforcements for newly arrived regiments like your own. He hands you an official-looking envelope stamped with a government seal. Your orders. You are to command a patrol of 5 enlisted men, including a sergeant. Your small unit of 6 is to report to the commander of the outpost at the Karan River crossing in 4 days' time. Producing a map from his jacket pocket, Sergeant Lanzarel points out the location of your new assignment. You guess that it would take you a day and a half of riding to get to your new posting. Lanzarel, with his greater knowledge of the country and the roads, gives an estimate closer to 3 days. That would mean that you would only have a single day and night in Noringia before heading out to your new posting. In that time you will be required to ready yourselves with everything you need. A personal mount and a veteran ranker for a sergeant to pick your enlisted men and advise you. Both the quartermaster's office and the personal assignment office work on a first-come, first-served basis, meaning that the earlier you request a horse or get your men recruited, the better quality they will be. What do you deal with first? Unit. There is no room for the thousands of soldiers in the king's army within the walls of a town the size of Noringia. While plain-blooded officers like yourself get comfortable belays, the common soldiery must seize houses from the local populace or set up tent camps outside the walls. As a result, the men in charge of looking after them must move with them. The officers in charge of personnel for each regiment make their office in a large semi-ruined farmhouse outside the walls. You meet with your regimental clerk scanning paperwork and regulations under the light, led in by the half-collapsed roof. Standard procedure stipulates that the commanding officer of a newly formed combat unit must choose his own sergeant, who, being more suited to judge and choose his men of a similar low station, will pick the rest of the unit. The clerk sends a runner out to find candidates available to serve under an officer with your lack of seniority. "You'll get the bottom of the bloody barrel, of course," Lanzarel says, quiet enough so that only you could hear him. "I just commissioned Cornet won't have much chance of getting a good sergeant. The more senior officers will have snapped them up already." Soon the runner returns with 3 men, each wearing the grey tunic of the Royal Dragoons and sporting 2 yellow chevrons on each sleeve. Corporals with the appropriate seniority to be eligible for a promotion to sergeant. The first to enter is Corporal Hernandez, a bespectacled young man with unkempt whiskers and a mop of long black hair. It only takes you a few minutes of conversation with him to realize that he is well read on the art of war and has a head full of ideas for the ordering and training of fighting men. The second candidate is Corporal Harlech, a large, two-fisted fellow with 10 years of service behind him. Boisterous and hot-headed, he is exactly what you'd expect of a sergeant, rough and confident. He tells you about his lads, a group of high-spirited ruffians more than willing to see some action under your command. The last corporal for your consideration is a familiar face, Fenton, the eldest son of your mother's lady's maid. You recall that he had left to join the army some time ago. You remember him as a good-natured lad, faithful to his friends and your family. However, he still seems like the bluff servant boy you had known as a child. It is clear that he sees men below him as friends or brothers, not as subordinates. You find it hard to believe that your old friend would be very good at keeping order in the ranks. We're not taking Harlech. I mean, that much should be obvious. I kind of like this archetype of, seeing those below you as more like comrades, friends, not really as, those people that follow my orders. My problem is while reading, I can't really take in what I read because I have to concentrate on reading it. So I'm not fully aware of why we're traveling there. I remember it takes 3 days, but what are we doing there? And is it a dangerous journey? Are we going to need a man like who's well read on the art of war? Or do we just need a competent group of people that can, fend for themselves a bit? You know what? We're picking Fenton. I might regret this, but go on. Thank you, Master James. I look forward to being of service to House Castleton once again. I know a few other fellows who used to live near your family's estate. I'll gather them up for you if I have your leave. When he is dismissed, Fenton leaves the tent with a wide grin on his face. He clearly relishes the opportunity to work with an old friend in this unfamiliar country. Fenton returns 2 hours later with a gaggle of men in tow. You recognize a few faces from your childhood. While a few seem to have the proper expression of deference, Fenton seems to be set entirely on picking men who remember you fondly from their earlier days. While you can appreciate the sentiment, it does not make Fenton's eye for fighting men any better. You instruct your new unit to assemble at the ruins of Noringia's landward gate at 8 the next morning, giving you plenty of time to finish your business in the town. You and Lanzarelle make your way to the pastures outside of Noringia's ruined town walls as the sun begins its long descent from its apex. The establishment of Noringia as the main port of arrival for the king's army has made it a feeding ground for those willing to make a profit out of the war. Accepting this as a fact of campaigning, the quartermasters of the royal army have set up their offices outside the walls. The grasslands outside the walls are now covered with orderly rows of tents and pavilions. The quartermaster's office is a large circular pavilion made of dull grey cloth. You barely have time to enter before the man at the desk sees the spurs on your boots and directs you to the stablemaster's tent, on the other side of the assembled tent city. It takes you half an hour to make your way to the correct tent. The stablemaster's pavilion is a small, half-open canvas structure hosting a series of manned desks and very little else. Behind the tent stands a large corral made from rough-hewn logs. The horses wandering upon the churned-up turf of the corral are hardly prized specimens. They are almost all mares considered to be more tractable and better behaved, but smaller and with less raw power. Most of the horses available look sickly and malnourished. Their eyes are sunken, their coats dull, and you can see the ribs sticking out from the bodies of the worst afflicted. Clearly, the long sea voyage and the makeshift conditions under which they are being housed have not done the poor animals any favors. Lanzarelle does mention an alternative, though. Several horse merchants, both foreign and local, have set up shop in the tent market. The scarcity of tolerable mounts for the king's army have driven horse prices up, and these merchants have clearly come to profit. Regardless of their motives, these private sellers do offer superior horse flesh. For a price. Just be careful, sir, he advises. A big charger may look impressive on the field, but stallions are nasty-tempered and stubborn cusses. Find yourself a mare or a gelding if you want something easier to ride. You? We did lose 10 wealth from that game. Okay. We're taking horses from the official stables. You decide that having a mediocre mount is less of a loss than spending a surely extortionate amount of money buying from one of the merchants in the camp. After 2 hours of careful inspection, you pick a mare which doesn't seem too badly starved or sick. She's a mottled brown color and rather small, but a few moments riding proves her to be tractable and sure-footed enough to serve. You take your newly requisitioned mount to the desk to receive a set of regulation saddlery. The straps are dull and some of the brasswork has turned an alarming shade of green, but it is comfortable and seems sturdy enough. As you and Lanzarelle walk your horse to the office's stables, you try to think up a name for your new mount. You decide to call her... You know what? Sure. In honor of Arachne, who you might recognize from Choice of Robots if you have seen me play or read through it. Arachne, eh? I suppose it will do. Bit more respect, please. You barely have enough time to catch a quick supper at the officers' club yourself before the sun goes down. Returning to your comfortable room for the last time, you write off a few letters to your family and go over your equipment and possessions, ensuring that all is in readiness. After a full night's sleep, you dress, wash and assemble your kit, leaving out the door half an hour after sunrise. It is the work of a few minutes to saddle, feed and prepare provisions for Arachne and set off. Fenton is waiting for you as you reach the game, but only 2 of the other men are. When the last 2 members of your patrol report in late, your new sergeant doesn't dare punish them with any more than a rather timid talking to. Thus, finally assembled, the 6 of you ride out the gate in single file along the old Imperial Highway. Glory, or infamy, awaits. And that'll be it for this episode of Sabres of Infinity. Finishing off, I think it was chapter 3 if I'm not wrong. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.